You know, we always talk about these tech giants as like these digital behemoths,
Oh, right.
all code and servers.
Yeah.
But what's so interesting and honestly kind of surprising is the like human side of things that really shapes them, especially when you think about policy.
Oh, absolutely.
So today we're going to dive deep into that,
Cool.
that intersection of policy and people. And we're looking at a company that is as influential as they come, Facebook.
Makes sense.
We've got excerpts here from Sarah Wynn-Williams' book, Careless People. And
Oh, yeah, this is a really good one.
it is,
Gives us such a unique perspective because it's her firsthand account
yeah.
of working in global public policy at Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And it takes us past those headlines,
Yeah.
you know, to the actual like nitty-gritty,
For real stuff.
the complex realities,
Yeah.
the challenges of it all.
It is, forget the, abstract policy papers.
Yeah.
Sarah's story brings you right into the action.
Right into it.
Diplomatic dinners, grappling with these huge international issues,
Yeah.
all while trying to make sense of Facebook's own culture.
The culture is a whole other thing.
It is, and that's what we're here for today.
Okay.
To understand what it's actually like to shape global policy
Yeah.
in this kind of company.
Mm-hmm.
Fast-growing, influential, the kind of company that really affects all of us.
For sure.
So we're going to see the day-to-day stuff,
Okay.
the nuances that don't always make it into the news cycle.
Yeah, the stuff that's happening behind the scenes.
Right, and I mean, the material we've got here.
It's a lot.
It is.
It covers so much ground. We see her, starting out all optimistic.
Yeah.
Then the struggles of working with governments around the world, the internal dynamics at play,
Yeah.
and then ultimately her disillusionment.
Right. It really is the full picture.
It is a comprehensive picture.
So let's start right at the beginning.
Okay.
With those early days.
Yeah.
Sarah's initial, excitement about Facebook, it's almost contagious.
Oh, I can see that.
She really, truly believed in its potential for positive global impact. I mean, she saw it as a force for good.
Interesting.
Right. And it's almost like her previous work at the UN,
Oh, wow.
regulating genetically modified organisms.
That's a pretty significant comparison.
It is a huge comparison.
Yeah.
What does that say about how she saw this company?
I mean, it really highlights that she wasn't just looking for any job.
Right.
She had a vision
Yeah.
for what Facebook could do globally.
Uh-huh.
And that UN parallel, it really emphasizes the level of influence
Yeah.
she thought the company could have on the world,
It's like shaping the future of the world.
basically.
And it wasn't, just a simple walk in and get the job.
Oh, definitely not.
Even after the offer came, it sounds like the role was still kind of vague.
Vague. How so?
Well, her future boss actually said, and I quote, "I'm still not even sure this is a job."
Wow. So they were really figuring things out as they went.
Exactly.
It's classic startup.
Right.
Building the plane while flying it.
That's a great way to put it.
The fact that they didn't even have the role nailed down
Yeah.
really shows a company figuring out its own structure,
Uh-huh.
priorities, all while expanding at an insane rate.
And then you have this almost like culture clash.
Oh, yeah.
You go from that traditional Washington, D.C. environment.
Right. With all its formality.
Yes. And then you walk into Facebook's offices and it's like a different universe.
Different how?
Exposed pipes,
Okay.
This almost deliberately casual vibe.
Huh.
Their D.C. office building, it felt so different from the usual lobbying firms and law offices.
Right. So it's like they were intentionally setting themselves apart.
I think so.
Like they wanted to project this image of being different
Yeah.
from the establishment,
Even though they were quickly becoming incredibly powerful.
which is really interesting to think about.
It is. And I think you see that in their mottos, like think wrong
Oh, yeah.
or move fast and break things.
Classic.
Right? That early ethos of speed and innovation.
Yeah, but maybe without considering all the consequences.
Maybe so.
So what was happening in terms of actual policy work during this time?
Well, in the midst of all this, they were working on things like the community guidelines.
Okay, the rules for user behavior.
Right. And those initial transparency reports.
Which were?
Those are basically Facebook saying, hey, here's how many times governments have asked us to take stuff down.
Oh, interesting.
And it sounds like her boss, Marn, was a big advocate for those.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So those are some early steps toward recognizing their responsibility
Yeah.
as a global platform. I mean, the community guidelines, they were an attempt to set some ground rules for online behavior.
Right.
And the transparency reports were an effort to be accountable,
Yeah.
to show what governments were asking for in terms of censorship.
Okay, now let's talk international relations.
Okay, going global.
This was a constant balancing act for Sarah.
I bet.
Especially with all the personal stuff going on in her life, too.
Like what?
Well, pregnancy and maternity leave the struggles of balancing work and family.
Yeah, that's never easy.
Especially at a place like Facebook.
Right, because the demands are so high.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she talks about arranging meetings with heads of state.
Oh, wow, like who?
The Prime Minister of New Zealand, for example.
Okay.
And then there's all the cultural nuances to navigate, like what kind of shirt to wear in Indonesia.
Oh, yeah, cultural sensitivity is so important.
It is, and these anecdotes really bring it all to life.
Me too.
Like the story about Mark seeming reluctant to meet with the New Zealand Prime Minister.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then Cheryl steps in, and it's like night and day.
Wow. So different approaches.
Totally. And it shows how they each viewed engaging with, the established world order.
Right, because Facebook was disrupting that order in a way.
Big time. And the clash between government protocols
Yeah.
and Facebook's internal dynamics. It's so clear.
How so?
Well, like Cheryl's friends expecting direct access to the prime minister.
Oh, wow.
It shows how those traditional boundaries just didn't really exist in the Facebook world.
It's like their own little world.
It kind of is. And it makes you wonder, how does a company with that much reach
Yeah.
interact with the established ways of doing things in different countries?
It's a big question.
It is. And the author talks about this private sector logic,
Okay, what's that?
where personal connections and making decisions quickly, that takes priority, and it often clashes with the more formal structures of like diplomacy.
Oh, I see. So two different worlds colliding.
Exactly.
So then we have Internet.org coming onto the scene.
Right.
With this huge vision of expanding Internet access globally.
It sounded so positive.
Oh, absolutely.
Who wouldn't want to connect underserved populations to the internet?
Right. It's a noble goal.
It is, but as we get deeper into the story,
Uh-huh.
things get a lot more complex.
Oh,
and the motivations behind it all come into question. And all of this is happening while Sarah is dealing with so much on a personal level.
Oh, right.
Like being pregnant, going on maternity leave.
Yeah.
And just the overall challenge of balancing work and family at Facebook.
Which we know is intense.
It's super intense. And there's this story about a nanny incident in New York.
Oh, no, what happened?
So Sarah's in Mexico for work.
Okay.
And she has to rely on a colleague's nanny to help with her newborn.
Oh, wow.
It just highlights the intensity and lack of boundaries.
Yeah. That's a lot to handle.
It is, and you have to wonder how this kind of pressure
Uh-huh.
affects the decisions being made within the company.
Right. Because it's all connected.
It is. Okay, let's move on to the internal culture at Facebook
Oh, okay.
and the often conflicting priorities.
Yeah. I'm curious about that.
Well, you see it really clearly in the different leadership styles.
Oh, like how?
You have Mark with his focus on Facebook being this neutral platform.
Right.
And then you have Cheryl, who seemed more comfortable with Facebook taking a stand.
Interesting.
Yeah, like, remember the organ donation megaphone idea?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good example.
So it's this tension between being neutral and shaping the conversation.
Exactly. And Mark's emphasis on neutrality,
Uh-huh.
it was presented as objectivity. But you could also see it as a way to avoid responsibility for the content being shared.
That makes sense.
And maybe a way to prioritize growth without alienating users.
Interesting.
Cheryl, on the other hand,
Yeah.
she seemed more willing to leverage Facebook's power for specific causes.
But even those choices could be controversial.
Absolutely. And the methods they use sometimes, too.
Right, so it's complicated.
And then there's this huge emphasis on growth.
Growth, like in terms of users.
Yeah, and reach and revenue.
Okay.
It was like the core value.
At the expense of other things.
It seems that way. They even called the growth team the beating heart of the company.
Wow, so expansion was everything.
It really seems like it. And when you have that kind of relentless pursuit of growth at Facebook's scale, the consequences can be huge.
Right, because their decisions affect so many people.
Exactly. And it can lead to situations where ethics or the negative impacts of that growth, they might not get enough attention.
And what about the people working there?
Well, even within Facebook, there was a huge wealth disparity,
Okay.
which created these totally different experiences.
Oh, I bet.
You had the director who was price insensitive, like money was no object.
Got it.
And then you had the economic volunteer.
So someone barely getting by.
Basically, and it shows this real divide within the company itself.
Oh, it's like two different worlds.
Totally. And those different financial realities, they would absolutely influence how people saw Facebook's mission.
Right. Their values, how their decisions were affecting the world.
And then you have Sheryl Sandberg.
Oh, yeah. She's a fascinating figure.
She is a very complex personality leadership style.
Like how so?
Well, demanding emails.
Okay.
Dressing down employees.
Oh, wow.
But then also championing women on Women's Day.
So a mix of everything.
Totally. And the book talks about this incident with an email at Davos.
That happened.
Basically, Sheryl sends this very demanding email.
Yeah.
And it shows how direct and maybe even intimidating she could be. But then she's also publicly advocating for women in the workplace.
Right.
But even that seemed carefully managed.
Interesting.
Like maybe a bit detached from the real issues.
Okay, so a lot of layers there.
A lot of layers.
And then we have the ethical dilemmas.
Yeah, these are the big ones.
Okay, so tell me about some of the issues they faced.
Well, China, Myanmar for basics.
Yeah, those are all huge.
They are. And these are the moments where you really see the difference.
Between what?
Between Facebook's stated goals and their actual actions.
Okay, I see.
So take China, for example.
Okay.
They really wanted to enter that market.
Huge market.
Huge. But there were all these concerns about censorship and data control.
Right.
And the fact that they were willing to compromise to gain access to that market speaks volumes.
Shows where their priorities were.
Exactly. And then you have the tragic events in Myanmar, which really highlight the consequences
of what?
Of Facebook's reach and their lack of moderation. And the author really struggled to get leadership to prioritize human rights concerns there.
So it's like the desire for growth was overshadowing these really important issues.
Yeah, it's a disturbing picture.
It is.
Okay, so let's dig deeper into some of those turning points.
Okay.
So you have the launch of Internet.org, which later became Free Basics in India. This was a huge moment, especially with the whole net neutrality debate.
Net neutrality meaning?
The idea that all Internet traffic should be treated equally.
Got it.
And Free Basics was basically Facebook offering free access to a limited set of websites.
Okay.
And a lot of people saw that as violating net neutrality.
Oh, I see.
They said Facebook was creating a two-tiered internet.
Favoring their own services?
Exactly. And Mark was very vocal in defending Free Basics.
Which probably just fueled the fire?
It did, and it ultimately led to a lot of pushback in India.
So a big setback for them.
Huge. And then you have the 2016 U.S. election.
Right, when things really blew up.
Yeah, it became clear that social media could be used for misinformation.
And manipulation.
And the book says that this sparked some internal discussions at Facebook about responsibility.
Okay, but were they doing enough?
It doesn't sound like it.
So a lot of talk, not a lot of action.
That's the impression I got.
And Myanmar, that was just devastating.
It was, Facebook became the main source of information for a lot of people there.
Okay.
But they didn't seem to have the resources or the urgency.
To do what?
To deal with the spread of hate speech and all the misinformation.
Which contributed to real-world violence.
Yeah. It's a horrific example of what can happen.
When a platform grows too quickly without safeguards in place.
And Sarah, she kept trying to raise these concerns, but it doesn't seem like leadership was taking it seriously enough.
So again, prioritizing growth over these crucial issues.
It's a pattern we see throughout the book.
It's a troubling pattern.
And on top of all of that,
yeah,
Sarah talks about experiencing sexism and harassment at Facebook. And she felt like those issues weren't being addressed properly by leadership.
So not just global issues, but internal problems, too.
Right. And it really shows that Facebook's public image didn't always match up with the experiences of their own employees.
And feeling unheard like that.
Yeah.
It can really impact your trust in a company.
Absolutely. And all of this ultimately led to Sarah leaving Facebook.
It makes sense she reached a breaking point.
It seems like it.
So many ethical compromises, personal struggles.
Yeah.
It was probably just too much.
Let's talk about China specifically. Because this is a really interesting case study.
How so?
Well, Facebook really wanted to get into that market.
Of course it wouldn't.
Right? It's enormous. But they were willing to go to great lengths.
To do what?
To appease the Chinese government.
Right.
They were even considering storing user data in China.
Which is something they'd resisted elsewhere.
Exactly, because of privacy concerns.
Right.
And then there's the example of them blocking content from Guo Wengui. He was a critic of the Chinese government.
Okay.
And Facebook blocked his content.
Wow. So bowing to pressure.
Yeah, it shows how much influence the Chinese government had.
And they were prioritizing market access over free speech.
It seems that way. And then there's the whole thing with the unauthorized apps.
What do you mean?
Facebook launched these apps in China secretly.
Oh, wow.
And it really shows that they knew what they were doing was problematic.
Or at least they knew it wouldn't look good.
Right. And that lack of transparency, it's concerning.
Definitely.
Okay, last but not least, targeted advertising.
Well, this is a big one.
It is the fact that Facebook could target users based on their emotions.
I mean, that's kind of scary.
It is. And the book says they were aware of this, and they tried to keep it quiet.
That's really unsettling.
It is. It makes you question their commitment to their users.
Absolutely. So much for connecting the world.
Right.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have. What are some of the key takeaways for you?
Well, I think this book really shows us the clash between idealism and reality.
Okay.
You have these initial visions for technology.
Yeah, making the world a better place.
Exactly. But then you have the pressures of corporate growth.
And the need to make money.
Right. And we see the human cost of that.
Both on a global scale.
Yeah.
And for the people working within these systems.
There's a lot to think about.
It is. What were some of those aha moments for you?
For me, it was the internal conflict at Facebook.
Yeah.
How they said one thing but did another. Especially with content moderation and international relations.
Right. And the personal challenges that people face.
Working in that environment.
It was intense.
It sounds like it. And also how corporate goals could just override ethical concerns.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is.
So, to our listeners out there,
yeah,
think about the power that these social media platforms have.
They're everywhere.
What are their responsibilities to us and to the world, and how can we make sure that technology is actually benefiting humanity?
Good question.
Not just being used for profit.
Right.
It's this constant tension between connection and control.
And the choices being made now, they're going to have huge implications down the line.
They really are. It's something we all need to be thinking about.
For sure.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today.
Thanks for having me.
This was great. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Bye.